Hello everyone, it's Richard Lewis here again with another video, and I haven't done one of these in a while, been busy with other things, and honestly, it's an attritional slog to keep up with all of the bullshit in esports. Even I'm tired of it at this point, but hey, it's just going to keep on coming. The industry is rotten to the core. But the good news is, at least, when I look back on all of the reporting that I've done and all of my contribution to esports, the one thing that'll keep me warm at night is knowing that I gave black eyes to a bunch of real nasty entities in the space, genuine pieces of shit, big companies that don't hold any of you in any regard whatsoever. And my reporting is going to be a thorn in their side for years to come, as evidenced by the story I'll talk about today relating to Activision Blizzard. They have been investigated by the US government for potential antitrust violations. And this all goes back to some reporting I did in 2019. I think I was the first person to produce any hard evidence that this was going on, or one of the potential violations was going on. I'll give you some background just so you're up to speed, because I know Activision Blizzard have been in the headlines a lot at the time of recording this for more foul shit.
Stop it. Get some help.
I'll cover that in due time, but let's just start with what this relates to. So in 2018, the end of 2018, Susie Kim, who was working as general manager of London Spitfire at the time, tweeted there was a soft cap on salaries within the league that would prevent Vancouver from paying a certain amount. She clarified this by saying there's a huge luxury tax that the org will have to pay. If an org can pay over a certain salary, more power to them, but there is a penalty for doing so. And that penalty essentially is that if you go over a certain amount of money, that money is then divided up by the people that stayed within the salary cap and is distributed amongst those teams. So in other words, they've set a limit on player earnings under penalty of the team being essentially fined, and that fine being redistributed among all of the other teams that stay within the cap. Now, shortly after making these comments, of course, Susie had to delete those tweets. This is standard practice. Anybody that's transparent about Activision Blizzard will find themselves in a bad place, especially if you're in their direct sphere of influence, if you're employed by them, if you're a player in their league, a manager, a coach, a partner, you know, whatever it is. It's known that Activision Blizzard have a stranglehold on the industry, the likes of which I haven't seen since the bad old days of Riot. If you're a journalist and you say anything negative about them or criticize them in any way, you will be blacklisted. They've done this to me, they've done this to others. It is just how they operate. Regardless, there was nothing more said about it for some time until I obtained this memo from John Spector, which was talking about housing and meal requirements for teams that wanted to compete in the 2020 season. Now, this was essentially the reason that I published this story, was just talking about, you know, requirements for the league and what it meant for potential expenses. But in the memo, it confirmed the existence of this luxury tax, referred to as a competitive balance tax. And this was the first time we'd seen Activision Blizzard directly acknowledge the existence of it. So you can see in the memo here, it says specifically that the player housing benefits are not included in competitive balance tax calculations, and that if you look down under player meals, it also says player meal benefits are not included in competitive tax balance calculations. This is essentially the money that people are spending on players. So why would this be a potential problem? Well, essentially, when you start setting a limit, an artificial limit on how much players can potentially generate in salary and additional benefits or whatever it might be, There needs to be an equitable balance for the players to essentially negotiate their position. So, for example, we know that in the NFL there are salary caps. However, there is also a players' union. There are also the players have rights to agents and advisors and everything else. But crucially, there is a player union and association that can use collective bargaining potential for players. And the salary cap is league-wide, and there's even limits that you can go over and resolve it later. So players' labour can be the value of their labour can be negotiated. There's not one homogenous entity that essentially controls what you can and can't make as a player. Now, unfortunately, in the Overwatch League, the reason why this might potentially be an antitrust violation is that there isn't a player union or association that is independent. There is no leverage that players can essentially make. They have to exist within a realm where Activision Blizzard and all the entities that are partners with essentially dictate how much you can make. And the competitive balance tax does put a soft cap on those earnings. Obviously, Activision Blizzard are unquestionably, they have to be aware of it. They have to be aware that this is true because, first of all, the reason I would assume that is because they've kept it a secret and instructed people to keep it a secret. And second of all, that the people that they have as partners and the people that they, worked with on the creation of the Overwatch League were all from a sports background anyway. I find it incredible to believe that these people who were tasked with creating the Overwatch League and making it the next big esport didn't have an understanding of how they could be running afoul of potential antitrust violations here. It's the reason why people in esports have pushed for player unions and associations for years. Unfortunately, even including the CSPPA, in my opinion, in CS, we're still yet to get one that properly functions and serves the needs of the players against those that would exploit players. So that brings you all up to speed with what you need to know before the report. But let's just get into that. It's by Liz Richardson, who is an Overwatch League beat writer at Esports. Jacob Wolf, who's currently at Esports, but a legendary esports journalist that you'll know from a number of other publications, including ESPN. They evidently worked on this story together. And the headline is US Department of Justice opens antitrust inquiry into Overwatch League's soft salary cap and competitive balance tax. The probe is being headed by the Department of Justice trial attorney Kathleen Simpson-Kiernan. She works for the Civil Conduct Task Force subdivision of the Antitrust Division in Washington. Kiernan and other DOJ attorneys have contacted and interviewed several former Overwatch League employees, according to our sources. The nature of Kiernan's investigation is not criminal, sources said. A spokesperson for the DOJ declined to comment as of June 6th. At the center of the inquiry is the lack of a players' union, which would allow the Overwatch League to apply for a non-statutory labor exemption. That status has been granted to the NFL, NBA, and other pro sports leagues who have labor unions. The exemption originates from a 1965 U.S. Supreme Court case, Amalgamated Meat Cutter versus Jewel Tea Corporation, which said union-employer agreements are outside of the purview of the 1890 Sherman Act, the landmark piece of antitrust legislation. Kiernan's team has also contacted Activision Blizzard, the operator of the Overwatch League, and as a result, Activision Blizzard has communicated to team executives not to tamper with or destroy information regarding player salaries, a routine measure taken in cases of a government investigation. We have received an inquiry from the Department of Justice and are cooperating accordingly, said an Activision Blizzard esports spokesperson. We deliver epic entertainment to our fans, fucking yawn, and support our players and teams in producing the most competitive and enjoyable esports leagues in the world. In 2020, the soft salary cap threshold equaled $1.6 million, according to league sources. If a team exceeded that amount in annual player salaries, the organization would then have to pay player salaries as well as the excess amount to the league as a luxury tax. This means every dollar above that $1.6 million limit will cost the team twice as much, impeding organizations from offering massive competitive salaries. That luxury tax would then be distributed among the non-offending teams. There are few teams that have ever naturally cleared this threshold based on standard market salaries for pro Overwatch players, sources also said. So the crucial part there is that this is a non-criminal investigation. Violations of the Sherman Act, which is the 1890 piece of legislation that keeps markets free, prevents monopolies, prevents people having, exerting influence to create monopolies for themselves by skirting aspects of the law and free trade. That can carry jail sentences and criminal proceedings. It's one of those laws that can be investigated for on a civil basis and a criminal basis. But there's no criminal proceedings here, according to the sources in that report, and that means that they're essentially going to look and see if Activision Blizzard have violated these antitrust rules and could potentially hit them with some sizable fines, a sizable slap on the wrist, and make recommendations, very firm recommendations, let's say, that they have to change the structure of the league. And again, crucially, this all revolves around the fact that they've implemented a soft limit on player earnings, despite being the singular place that these players can ply their trade in what's known as a monopsony, not to be confused with a monopoly. It's like a monopoly, but it's slightly different because this is a market condition in which there is only one potential buyer for what's being sold. And in this case, what's being sold is player labor. So the idea that they don't have an equal footing with the people that are doing the buying, that they can't essentially dictate higher prices for their labor. Let's say you're the best player in the world. Well, there's a soft cap on how much you can earn because no one will want to go over that because of this luxury tax. And there's no one you can go to kind of fight back and push back against the existence of this. So yeah, it's pretty bad and not great for players. Now, I will add, I'm not an expert in that particular field, especially when it comes to American labor laws. I don't know if this will actually go places, but it's something that is being taken very seriously. I know from my own investigations that basically, yes, they are interviewing former Overwatch and current Overwatch employees. They have made a demand for discovery, essentially, which is why you cannot delete any emails. Anybody deleting anything that ascertains to salary negotiation, to any emails relating to the league operations, anybody caught deleting those things can be hit with obstruction of justice charges and God knows what else. So yes, the government are taking it seriously and they're going to have full access to all of this information. What does that mean for Activision Blizzard in the long run? I mean, look, the Overwatch League's not in a great place as a product anyway, right? And we've seen over the years that they are making cutbacks on spending. They are looking to make it a more cost-effective proposition. We've seen after the pandemic how they're like, well, we're going to go online now. We're going to have more online games, and actually that's really good for us. That's what we've pivoted to. And viewership remains a bone of contention, that it's not particularly great, but esports viewerships took a bit of a hit now as we're sort of coming out of pandemic fatigue and people want to go out and get back to their lives. So there's a little bit of that at play, no doubt. But the bottom line is the Overwatch League has been a massive bugbear for Activision Blizzard. It just hasn't delivered on any of the levels that they wanted it to. It hasn't become the premier esports league by any stretch of the imagination. It hasn't been a particularly big financial success. Overwatch hasn't captured the imaginations of the culture in the way that they'd hoped. And with Overwatch 2 now sort of around the corner and leaks from that coming out, people are looking already disappointed at a sort of sequel that isn't even really a sequel. It's not in a great place. And the ongoing investigations into the league and its operations, especially if they're then recommended, you're going to have to change the way the league operates and create a player union that legitimately fights for players so they can make more money. All of a sudden, all of those partnered orgs that can essentially at least keep the salary price down under that $1.6 million. If suddenly the market's inflated for whatever reason, or somebody with more money than everybody else can just come in and buy the best talent and essentially dominate however long is left in the Overwatch League's life cycle, I think it becomes even less of a desirable entity to be partnered with. So It's not a surprise that Activision Blizzard have engaged in this. As I said, my read on it is they simply wanted to see if they could get away with it. Like all big companies, they will get away with what they can, and when they get caught, they just write a check. That's how it operates, and that's probably what's going to happen here. It might not even be a fine. They might just agree to do whatever the government says, which of course would be wise, because you don't want to piss off the American government, and Activision Blizzard have already done that after the Hong Kong debacle. So, yeah, there you have it. I mean, another negative headline for Activision Blizzard on Bobby Kotick's watch, and yet he's getting paid $155 million because the share price keeps going up because Call of Duty's a success. It's mad, isn't it? But anyway, there you go. That brings you up to speed with that little story, and I'll be back reporting on some of the other stuff, the more important stuff relating to Activision Blizzard very soon. Until then, take care of yourself.